Welcome to episode 8 of intx, where we have career conversations in tech. Today we have on Aashni Shah for the second time. The first time Aashni was on, we talked about Microsoft and Amazon and all things culture and how to get into the roles essentially. So if you're interested in how to get a job at Microsoft or Amazon, check that out. This episode was focused more around entrepreneurship and collaboration and networking, as Aashni's main focus at present is Hype Docs, which is her company is centered around celebrating accomplishments and recognition in the workplace. Currently looking at integrations with Slack and potentially Teams as well. So right now that's what she's focusing on. And so in this podcast, we talk about the inception of it, how things are going, ups and downs of startup life. And unlike the last one, this one has video as well. So if you're listening anywhere, you can check us out on YouTube. Just search in intx podcast and you'll find us on there. So now let's get into the show. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're on episode 8 and we have our episode 4 guest back, Aashni Shah.
Hey everyone, nice to be back. Thanks again, Luke.
No, it's good to talk to you again. So last time I thought it would be good to do a second run of this, because last time we didn't even really get into how Hype Docs or any of that started. So last episode was kind of like pre-startup. So that was like your more formal career. So now it'd be interesting to see how you turned that into where you are now. So how you moved into the world of startup.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the best place to start with is right around COVID or just before COVID. I left my last job, which was at Square. And, I will never say enough good things about them. I loved working there so much. But I just needed a change. And so I left the job there. I moved back to Toronto. And then I traveled for a couple of months. And then by the time I moved back to Toronto, like actually moved back here, and got my apartment and everything set up and started job hunting, Miss Corona made an appearance and put massive wrenches in my plans, because as I'm job hunting, there are so many companies that have started layoffs and they've frozen hiring and they've done all of these different things, and you just kind of get stuck in this web of like, oh, okay, well, what am I doing? And then on top of that, my dad, who's based in Kenya, did sort of a mass recall of all family members that weren't physically in the country. And I think within 24 hours of this, I ended up back on a flight back home. And I understood. And honestly, I'm so glad I did, because if anything happened to them or if anything happened to me, like I'd rather be with family than alone in an apartment in Toronto.
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly.
Especially being so far as well.
Yeah. I mean, I have plenty of family in Canada too, but it's my parents, it's my sister. Like I want to be with them.
Of course.
And it ended up, what I thought would be like 2 or 3 weeks ended up being 8 months of me staying back in Kenya. And I was still job hunting. I had quite a few job offers available to me, which is amazing considering the current climate.
Yeah.
But none of them really felt right. Like they all kind of, I didn't understand why at the time, but none of them felt like that's what I wanted my next step to be. I eventually realized the reason is because I didn't want to just be a developer anymore. I wanted to do more with my time, and I had more that I could do. And that's part of the reason I felt a little restless, both at Square and then also looking for my next job. And then I was catching up with 1 or 2 other friends, and they kind of reminded me that one of my goals was always to start my own thing. And it's one of those, if there's ever been a time or an opportunity to start something, it's now. So I started working, I think it was like March or April, I started working on mailto. It was previously called Taonga. It's currently called mailto, which is a document, a privacy focused document sharing platform or document management platform. Really, really loved working on it. But as of a few months ago, I've decided to shut that project down. Right. And then while I was working on that, I was reminded of Hype Docs, which is a concept that I learned while I was at Square, and something that I felt like I was really missing. So while I was at Square, some of the other women engineers taught me of this concept of cold hype docs, which is where you just track all of the achievements that you have or that you're doing at work.
Mm-hmm.
And within our office in the Kitchener office, which is not the main office, I actually started doing that with a group of the women in our office where we would meet once a week. We even had a rule: if you forgot to show up to the meeting, then you had to bring baked goods for people for the next one. And unfortunately, we didn't get enough baked goods, but people would show up pretty consistently, which was great. And it was amazing because it just turned into this really collaborative space that we all felt was like a safe space for us to talk with each other, trust each other, and then also figure out like how is my career development going. And I, like one person shared in those meetings that she noticed she wasn't getting code review opportunities. And if she's not getting code review opportunities, two things are happening there. One is her teammates don't trust her code review skills. And the second is she's not able to learn and grow by looking at other people's code. And so we gave her some suggestions and ideas of like how you could effectively overcome that and talk to your manager and talk to some of your teammates and say, hey, I'd love to learn more. Could you add me onto your next code reviews? But it's not something you realize until, somebody else calls it out, kind of thing too.
Yeah.
And it just became a really great way of doing career development, supporting each other, building up our own confidence, and like helping with getting us promoted or getting us to the next level, which is one of my goals was personally. And as I left Square and started working on my own things, like working on Taonga/Mailto, that was something I really missed. I missed having that group of people that I would, have my weekly check-in with and track and celebrate the stuff that we were working on. And so I think in August or September of 2020, I decided to just take a weekend to code up what I thought would be an early version of Hype Dogs. And I launched it and announced it in 2 Slack communities that I was in. And all of a sudden I had like 3 or 4 paying customers. And I was just like, oh, okay, that's nice. That was unexpected. Shit, now I actually have to make this thing work or make sure it continues working. And for whatever reason, I just kept leaving Hype Dogs on the back burner. And I think in my head, Mailto was always the like multi-billion-dollar idea. Like if I could get Mailto working, I could see how it becomes a multi-billion-dollar product. Whereas Hype Dogs is like a really great multi-million-dollar product. And so I always wanted to work on the bigger, scarier thing. Eventually realizing that Hype Dogs has legs, and Hype Dogs, like, despite me not doing much in terms of advertising, I'd still have people find us. I'd still have, like, Fast Company, for example, interviewed me and did a feature on Hype Dogs, which is huge. Like, it's Fast Company. I'm a nobody. I just announced us on Product Hunt.
And did they just reach out to you for that?
Yeah, so they saw my launch on Product Hunt, and then one of the journalists from most of them are freelancers. So one of the journalists that writes for Fast Company reached out and said, "Really like what you're building. Would you be open to doing an interview?" And I was like, "Hell yeah! Like, how do we make this happen faster?"
Sorry, so what's Product Hunt? Is that somewhere to launch new products?
Yeah. So for folks that aren't familiar with Product Hunt, it originally started as a mailing list, as a way to get or learn about new products that are getting launched. Now it's a full-fledged website and community where if I'm launching Hype Docs, and I'm actually hoping in the next 2 months to launch the new version of Hype Docs on there, or like Stripe is another very popular company that launches or does like mini announcements on there. But you can also find pretty much any product under the sun being announced on Product Hunt, and there really is an art to how you launch on Product Hunt. You wanna be able to launch and announce it, and then the members of the community will go and see what is out there. They'll upvote on whatever is launched every day, and so that's sort of a leadership board. And the art to it comes because you want to be at the top of the leaderboard, so you get included in some of the additional media opportunities, like Product Hunt's newsletter, which goes out to thousands of people every day or every week, depending on what you're subscribed on. And Yeah, so I had a phenomenal person help me with my product hunt launch. We were actually top 3 on the day I launched. And Product Hunt at the time was awarding grants to makers. And so I won one of those grants as well, just because of the type of product we were building. But
Brilliant.
it's a phenomenal, yeah, it's a phenomenal platform for anyone that just wants to learn about new technology that's out there. Like I'm sure you're hearing of all the trends of AI tools that are out at the moment. I guarantee you most of them have been launched on Product Hunt at one point or another, and that's where
Right.
some of the early customers have come from.
Ah. Right. So
Yeah.
then for just to unpack that a little bit, you said your first couple of paying customers were on just like Slack channels. Was this channels you actively sought to then go and market, or was this communities you kind of were already involved in?
They were communities I was already involved with. So one of them in particular is the On Deck Fellowship community, and that's a community of folks that are at the time they were largely founders
Hmm.
building out their own companies. Eventually, they've got a variety of different communities. Like they've got some that are specifically for what's it called, climate change. They've got some that are for product managers. They've got like the community or the on deck team themselves have built out a few sub communities, but the overall like large scope community is still focused on like founder and product development type stuff.
Right. Because I
Yeah.
think maybe that's something which people don't understand as much in regards to online communities is when they make something new, whether it's a podcast or a YouTube channel or a product, they will just gravitate towards these communities and just like spam in. And no one knows who they are. But because they're
Mhm.
new to it, it feels anonymous. But in reality, there's a whole community there that actually do talk to one another and recognize one another's names. So when you just pop up, you just seem like a spammer. Um,
Exactly. And a part of the reason I had so much success with my product on launch is because of these communities.
mm,
Like, you know, I try to be very careful and very respective of who, like, not spamming people. Like, it's something I personally hate.
yeah.
But I would reach out to the folks in those communities that I've spoken to and who've supported me so far, and to be like,
Mhm.
hey, I just launched on Product Hunt. Would love if you could support me. And
Yeah.
that's a subtle key. Like everyone in those communities knows, like, please upvote and comment on our launch because you're not officially allowed to ask for that.
Right.
And that's what helped get some of the initial traction. And because these communities are like in the on deck one in particular is global, like you have folks that are in Asia, you have folks that are in Africa and Europe, and then you have folks that are in North America. And so if you time it well, you can actually get those upvotes coming in at a relatively steady stream, which helps keep your product at the top. Like when I say there's an art to how to do a long-term product on, like there's an art to it. You really
Yeah.
have to plan it. You can't just launch something. Yeah.
Right. That's a good note to have. So then you get the grant, because one question I was going to ask was about funding, especially at the beginning, because loads of people have business ideas. Do you think that grant was helpful, or do you think it was almost necessary at that point in time for the continuation of Hype Docs?
Yeah. So the grant was $5,000, which is not a huge amount of money in the grand scheme of, like, you know, living expenses today
Company.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is so expensive to just exist these days. So I think it was more the recognition that I got and like the validation of like, hey, this is something that we're building, and Product Hunt appreciates it. And they, you know, like that was the validation I got from it more than the
Right.
$5,000.
Yeah.
That being said, 5,000 US dollars converts to like a lot more in Canadian dollars. um, the, at the time, my finances, like my money, would go into Mido.
Hmm.
And so like I actually hired a dev team to help build out some of Mido features, and I hired an intern that was paid on Mido to build out some of the stuff that we were doing. And so my money would actually go into Mido.
Hmm.
Hype Dogs, and again, Hype Dogs has legs, but I have spent very little money on it. Like even today, I only just increased our Netlify subscription. Like I'm only just started paying for Netlify. Prior to like 2 months ago, I was on the free plan. So everything to keep the website up and running and to, you know, make sure that our customers are able to get access to their information, because I know how to code, I was able to do all of that on the fly. and only pay for the domain hosting once a year, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's definitely a way to keep the costs low.
Yeah. And now, now as we start building and adding more stuff to it and having more features added, we do need to start paying for a couple of things. But even then, we're pretty lean. Like my costs at the moment are maybe under 100, like definitely under $100. I'm not paying more than that for anything at the moment. And a lot of this is because I'm in startup communities and benefit from startup discounts, whether it's like a free subscription to Hootsuite for a year or something else. But those become instrumental when it comes to like scheduling, marketing stuff, and trying to figure out sales tactics and things like that.
Definitely. When you say 100, do you mean like 100 a month or something?
Oh yeah. Sorry, $100 a month.
Yeah, that's basically is next to nothing. No, that's amazing to have a business with that little expenditure.
Yeah, I mean the benefits there are like we are a global tech product. So I mentioned my family has businesses in Kenya. One thing I've noticed with those businesses is a lot of them are physical stores, physical locations, and the amount of money you spend just on maintenance costs and like making sure that the building structure is okay, like it's crazy. Whereas for an online tech product, like I could build and launch Hype Dogs and run it for 2.5 years, spending no more than $30, like over the entire 2.5 year period, which is nuts.
That is.
And made like a couple $1,000s off it. And again, this is no advertising, nothing really. So like really nuts when you think about it. And then the other end of it is as you start, well, because I'm a developer, I know how to build things myself. So I don't have to necessarily go and hire someone to do that, which is a huge saving. And then I'm also very scrappy. So I use Netlify for our web hosting, and I use Netlify Functions as our backend, which if folks aren't familiar with it, it's very similar to like AWS Functions or like serverless functions, where you don't need a full-fledged backend system. Instead, you've got these endpoints that are basically a function that runs and does whatever you need it to do, and it's still connected to your database, but it's not a full-fledged, massive Java backend that you need. It's a much smaller piece of code that you can have running and do everything you need in the same way. So because I know or have been learning of these things, I managed to keep my costs very low. I don't know about the scalability aspect of this, but that's a future Aashni problem. Like we'll figure that out later. I'll hire a CTO and that person can figure all that stuff out, and I don't need to do that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's it. Don't start worrying about the problems when you've got too many customers until you get too many customers.
Exactly. I think that's been one of my struggles actually, is like as a personal thing, I love optimizing and I love making sure things are efficient and to some extent scale friendly. And sometimes I need to remind myself, like, no, stop that. Like build a shitty version that works and get customers. And then if it's working, great. If not, move on. So that's definitely a hard lesson I've had to learn.
Definitely. And do you think that lesson has helped you advance learning that? And I ask that just briefly first because that's what I had noticed in the different like kind of endeavors that I'm working on and kind of projects and stuff, is for years I was too much of a planner and a perfectionist, and I would make videos, not release them, and write like basically business plans, never do it. But now I'm just like, just make something. And if it works, just then keep adding a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing I've learned, both with Mailto and Hype Dogs. And as like today, I am so much better at it. And I often have conversations with, friends, other founders that I get introduced to who are either looking for technical advice or they're just a friend and we're having a chat. And they want to build something. Like I'm actually working for a customer right now. So I do some freelance work on the side. And the person I'm working for is a influencer, like a social media influencer, and they want to build a technical, like they want to take their audience offline or on, let me rephrase that. They want to take their audience off of, TikTok, YouTube, wherever it is they're coming from, and build a community for them. So that way they have a little bit more autonomy and control in case any of those platforms go down, which is smart. But they don't know what they want to build. And so I'm just like, okay, well, from everything I've learned in the last 3 years, like these are the first 4 steps that you should do. One of which is you should probably just ask your customers what they want, like instead of
Yeah.
trying to guess. And it's amazing because that went over so well. We sent out a survey on a newsletter that they send out regularly on Sundays, and we already have like 200 answers from just that survey alone. That validated a lot of our initial ideas, but also showed us things that we didn't even think about in terms of like what category are people interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if I were to start a new product or project, I feel like my first month would be the amount of growth I did for the first year in Hype Dogs. I'd probably be able to condense that into the first month because I've learned how to validate, but I've also learned how to like just get an MVP out there really quickly. But you have to go through that grind a few times before you get to that level, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I imagine then, did Mido start first, you were saying? Did that help, even if Hype Docs still felt as if it was quite an extended period of time to get it off the ground fully? Do you think that was expedited by Mido?
So Hype Docs took me 4 days to code, like come up with like, I want to build this, code it and launch it. Or like when I say launch it, I mean not the product on launch, just the quiet launch in the communities.
Mm-hmm.
What I did with Mido originally is, at the time I was just learning about how to do startup validation or idea validation and things like that. And so I must have spent a good month and a half doing user interviews to understand what is it people are looking for, and validating the idea or the concepts that I'm hoping to build.
Yeah.
Where I think I made a mistake there is people really loved the idea of having something privacy focused for managing and handling all their documents, but they weren't willing to pay. And I didn't ask that question. And that caused a lot of my like we build a product and people loved the idea. They loved the concept. They loved the way it worked, but they weren't going to pay for it. And so I had to shift my thinking. And I think the next version of what I came up with based on that learning is taking a B2B approach with it, where we're actually selling the product to businesses like realtors or banks or even hospitals, not hospitals, but like clinics and things like that.
Yeah.
Where they need to make sure your information is safe and secure, and then you're able to track it all in one app. But that would require a fair amount of rebuilding, and I just didn't have it in me to do that after such a long time of not getting things to work, and on top of that, seeing Hype Docs kind of working on its own. So that was one thing that I learned how to do the validation stuff. I did it wrong, but I learned how to do it for Hype Docs, for Mido, sorry. I didn't really do that for Hype Docs. I don't think I ever did it for Hype Docs. And so that's something that I'm trying to correct as I build our B2B version of Hype Docs, which is the new stuff we're working on today.
Yeah.
And I think we were just chatting about being able to build and launch something really quickly. There's a lot of power to that, but I think taking that like week to go and do a little bit of validation research and actually understanding, is this something people want, before you spend time coding and building, I think is so much more important. Because as developers, you and I know, okay, cool, I can code this out and it'll take me like a week to do, or it'll take me 2 days to get this out. And as soon as we've coded something, I personally get very attached to it and I don't want to just throw it away.
Sure.
And I know a lot of developers are like that. And so I think that's the secret, which business folks like, and that's one of the reasons that people recommend like having a co-founder, like having one technical, one non-technical, is because a non-technical person should be responsible for validating and getting these ideas and concepts together. And then the technical person can just go and they should only spend their time building. I say this as a solo founder doing both.
You just have one Aashni on shoulder and one on the other.
Exactly. One's the devil saying code it, and one's the angel being like, do we really need this feature?
Yeah, exactly.
But one of the things I've learned even with Hype Docs is I've coded features and I've learned to have to give up code. So for example, we used to have profile pages where you could go to hypedocs.co/Aashni. And with this new version we're launching, we're actually just killing that page because we found the users were not understanding and using it well, or like we didn't actually promote it well enough on the platform for users to see it. And with the new B2B direction we're taking, it doesn't really make sense for the business model either. And so I just had a random afternoon coding session where I just killed everything related to that page and then submitted that code, and just like, okay, that's this felt cleansing a little bit.
Yeah, as long as you saved it somewhere else so that you feel as if you never really let go of it. That's the coding way.
GitHub.
Exactly.
GitHub, what's it called again? Not repo, oh, push commits. There we go. GitHub commits. You can always just go and undo a commit
exactly.
message later. Yeah.
Do you think that being quite entrepreneurial has made it easier for you to do this? So to have the mindset of both the non-technical and technical? Because I would imagine, like, coming from myself, I was software developer, but more so as a way to learn tools to do things that I want to do. I don't really have an innate love of, not technology because I do, but like the engineering aspect of technology. That's not something that I just want to look at the next library, the next layer of libraries. I just look like, I want to do this. How do I do it? And I figure it out.
Yeah.
Do you have the same kind of thing?
Yeah, I think like I still love coding. Don't get me wrong. Like I hope that I'm still coding in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. But I think the sort of realization point is at a company like Square or Microsoft or Amazon, if you want to be a developer, your depth of knowledge has to grow incredibly for you to actually up level and get promoted to some of those additional levels. And you are not necessarily working on like, how do we get this initial idea out there? You're now working on, hey, we have 3 million users using this platform and we need to implement a new thing. And it's a whole other kind of challenge. And I'm sure I would enjoy it if I ended up working on it again. Like I have done some stuff in that realm in the past. But where I find joy is more on the initial idea concept and building that initial version and figuring out the hacky implementations you can put together to get that initial version up and running. And when you mentioned the entrepreneurial side of things, I don't think I've given enough credit to this, especially early on when I first started building my business. But I'm so fortunate to have the family that I do, and in particular my dad, who is a multi-business owner. And these are not technical products. Like, I love my dad to bits. He is terrible with technology, but the way that he runs and operates these businesses and is doing multiple businesses a day, even today, is something that I've watched since I was a young girl. And so understanding the importance of how to organize and get your work done, how to prioritize different tasks, even just how to treat the people on your team. Because I have a phenomenal team of interns at the moment that support a lot of what I do. He's helped me learn a lot of that stuff. And so even when I was on my trip to Kenya for the last 6 weeks, I actually went into the office with him most days of the week so that I could contribute back and see, what technical tips and tools can I share with the company who is still using spreadsheets for basic things. But then secondly, like how does he continue to manage with all these different projects that are coming on board? And any given company, it's not a small company, it's a massive company, and they've got 20 different projects going on at one time, plus all of your day-to-day activities that need to happen. And how do you manage that? How do you leverage that? How do you organize and structure your team to be good around that? And that's all information I can then take and put into building my own company as well.
Yeah, definitely. And you touched on that before last time about the multiple companies. How have you felt then narrowing your focus into Hype Docs? Is that something you feel that you have to do in the short term to then maybe expand it back out again? Or
yeah, I think that has been quite an interesting change for me. I think focusing on Hype Docs has been really, really good. It's it's really making me think about what I need to do to get the company to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me has become really important because most of last year was a bit of a write-off, and I didn't get to do the type of work that I wanted to do. I maybe only got like a month or two of actual work time last year. And I am, again, I am better, healthier, happier for what happened last year. But this year I need to show some kinds of success. If for, I mean, it would be great for me mentally, but also my bank account is not too pleased with me either right now. And so that was part of the reason I narrowed my scope down to just Hype Docs, because it has legs. It's been generating its own money for the last for the last 2 years. Not a lot, but it's been generating some amount of money that I like have not spent a dime. Like technically it's all profit because of how cheaply I've managed to run it.
Yeah.
But when we keep finding customers, or customers keep finding us with me doing zero advertising, zero marketing on it, it's a sign that we need to really think about how can we grow it and how can I expand it. And I've started doing more of those user interviews to figure out, okay, if we are targeting heads of people or heads of HR at a company, what is it that they're looking for in the types of tools that they want to build? And one of the questions we're trying to figure out right now is, are we going for large companies, which would be nice because then it's a larger check size from each company. But then we're also competing with existing products out there that are doing more than we do. Or do we tackle smaller companies that don't necessarily need all the features that the large companies are offering and therefore don't need that price tag that the large companies are offering? And we can offer them something that fits what they need today and grow with them in the future as well. And that's been, like I've managed to do a lot more of this thinking and strategy building because I'm only focused on Hype Dogs.
Yeah.
And then I'm actually able to do more, like I'm able to deliver more, like I'm able to code more, I'm able to do more of other things as well. And then it's allowed me to have a better work-life balance too, because I'm now not trying to do the same amount of work on two companies at the same time, which 2 years ago I was more than happy to. But as of today, like I'm able to spend more time with friends, more times with my partner, more times with family and things like that. And it really does make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something as well that I'll have to hear, because I've got like quite a lot of things on the go. I think it's one of those, I just like to be busy, and I end up, something that I've been thinking about recently, watching all the YouTube business stuff, is all to do with narrowing your focus, like the if you chase two rabbits you get none type of thing. And I was just saying, like, when something has legs, to pursue that. Because, like, for instance, just example of this podcast, all it is a podcast at the moment, but the idea could be to, expand it and such in other directions, professional service directions. But when you're already spread thin, trying to run loads of different things, half of which aren't even bringing any return at all, it's like
Exactly.
you need to learn to cut that bit off and focus.
What I would actually say is, and I've tried to keep this as true for me as possible, is figure out what your passion is and figure out what you want to be doing with your life. And then as you look at all the different projects you're working on, which ones are going to help you get to that point? So, for me, my passion has always been, I want to build a better tomorrow. I've been saying that for years. It's in my email tagline. It's on my Twitter bio. And it's because I want to find ways to, from a young age, I've always worked on philanthropic projects. I've always worked on, ways to give back to, very impoverished communities in Kenya. I want to find ways to be able to do similar things with my technical skills as well. And that's why I use the word build. How can I build a better tomorrow?
Yeah.
And so for me, with Hype Dogs, that's something that I'm 1,000% able to do, because if we succeed, we're able to help under recognized folks have better jobs. They're able to get recognition for the work they're doing. They're able to get salaries that they should earn, or salaries that they've earned, and get promoted when they're supposed to, which is a huge change to what's currently happening in the environment. And so that maps really well to what my mission statement is. But aside from that, I still do a lot of other, random things here and there. Like the 6 weeks I was in Kenya, I was going to our family business's office almost every day. And that for me is, it's it's something that my dad has built, and it's something I want to see survive and thrive. And if I can give back even a little bit of my time to support them, it's the least that I could do. And for me, that is important, because I'm like you. I love to keep myself busy. Like, I have so many hobbies. I love playing violin. I have not played in a while, but I love playing violin. I love
Cool.
photography. I love scuba diving, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And these are things that I want to keep doing, and I'm going to prioritize doing them. And it's just about figuring out how they map to the future that I want to have, and not necessarily following every single rabbit, as you put it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely something to consider. um, had something record that there. Yeah. Yeah, I'll definitely need to narrow it down anyway. Uh, I completely lost what I was going to say there. You honestly, it was.
Well, to give you a couple seconds to remember it, you know, I'm I'm similar to you in terms of, like, I love working on multiple projects, and I love
Mhm.
working on things, like keeping myself busy. And for me, it's not like, I don't view it as work per se. I view it as things
Yeah.
that I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And I think if you enjoy doing work, you shouldn't feel like you have to stop after your 9 to 5 shift.
Mhm.
If it's something you're deeply passionate about, and it's something that gives you joy, keep doing it, keep working on it, because you never know where it's going to lead. What is important is making sure you're trying to keep that balance, and you're finding ways to give yourself time to rest, give yourself time to relax, to go and do things that aren't work related. If
Mhm.
for no other reason, then it will give your brain time to rest and come up with even better ideas that you can then implement back into your business. That's what I always say to folks that are like 1,000% business, business, business only. It's like, hey, give your brain a rest, and you'll be surprised what it gives you back in return. Yeah,
Yeah. Absolutely. It made me remember what I was going to say as well. So thanks.
perfect.
And it's relating to that. That yeah, you end up. What I notice is quite a lot of the things that I like to do business wise, they're a little bit every day. So like keeping it kind of ticking over. But you notice when you just like do it every day, so say it takes you roughly an hour to do whatever it is, so fix one bug in coding, whatever that may be. But you end up getting to a point where you lose that strategic thinking and strategic direction. And I always get it where I get stuck in this rabbit hole because I've been working pretty much like 9 till then 10 p.m. It's like these crazy long days every day. Um, and you just get stuck in you're just doing and not doing any thinking. And I noticed like maybe every like 10 days or so, I'll then have that day where I just wake up and I'm exhausted. I can't think, can't do anything. And I always notice that next day I'll have like a time slot I'll give myself and say, right, I need to organize my thoughts. And then you come up with all these like strategic ideas. Um, and I was going to say, do you think something which it might be an engineering focused mindset, but that you are kind of busy for the sake of being busy because busy feels productive, as opposed to being strategically productive and choosing what to do? Um, would you say that's something that you've learned to be from that and to being more strategically focused?
So hearing you say, "Are you busy for the sake of being busy because it feels productive?" I feel attacked, but you're probably right.
Oh, don't worry. I felt attacked to myself while saying it as well.
Oh boy, that's one of those introspective questions that I'm going to be thinking about for the next 2 months. Thanks, Luke.
Well,
So
hopefully it gives you better work-life balance.
yeah, so I mean, I've put, especially because of what happened to me last year, like I've put a lot of emphasis in make sure I have a better work-life balance. And that being said, it's not perfect. Like I definitely have the occasional night here or there where I'm like, I'm gonna keep coding, and all of a sudden I see the sunrise, and it happens, whatever. Um, but in terms of what you were asking, I'm reading a book right now called Eat That Frog. And
Right.
I don't remember who the author is, but um, it's it's a book that talks about, I think, 21 different ways of how to be more productive. And
Mm-hmm.
on the section I was just reading, they were talking about how to organize and plan yourself and how you should have multiple lists. You have like a monthly list of things you want to achieve for the month. Then you have a weekly list of things you want to achieve for the week. And then every day, ideally at the end of your day, because then your brain is subconsciously solving things for you while you sleep so that the next day you're starting on a high run or a high note.
Yep.
Write a list of what you want to accomplish for the next day. And the reason you have three different lists are like some things are monthly tasks. They're not things that you need to do overnight, whereas other things are like tasks that just get added in randomly as like your day-to-day stuff happens. And I really like that concept because one of the things they talk about in the book is if you spend even 10 minutes just organizing your plan for the next day, organizing yourself for the next day, it makes you significantly more productive because you're going to figure out, hey, these like 10 things that I thought I needed to do, we actually don't, like they're already taken care of. Or here's something that we definitely need to get done that wasn't even on the list, but the only reason you remember it is because you wrote this down and you figured out what you needed to get done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by approaching it that way, and I haven't been following that methodology directly. I have a list that I'll like migrate to a new list every 2 or 3 days. So not quite the same strategy, but similar enough. I found that it's helped make me so much more productive because I'm able to write down what it is that's in my head and then cross off things, which gives you that dopamine hit. It's very similar to what we do with hype dogs. But also just like structure and organize, and more importantly, prioritize what needs to get done.
Yeah.
And so I think for folks that are listening, if that's something you struggle with in terms of you've got 100 ideas and you don't know what to start working on, highly recommend just write it all down. And maybe it's something you're never going to get to, but at least if it's written down, it's not occupying that space in your head anymore. And you can instead use that space to focus on the first thing that you want to tackle, or the fourth thing that you want to tackle on the list instead. The other thing that I would say is, and this is a new thing that I'm doing, and Luke, I feel like you're going to love it. To the listeners, I hope you are going to love it as well. Spend maybe over a day or like a week, just to give you a rough average, write down all the things that you're doing on a given day, and then look at ways that you can automate some of those tasks. And so the reason I say, Luke, you might love this is I assume you're trying to create social media content for the podcast as well as some of the other projects you work on. Well, with tools like ChatGPT and Canva, you can actually automate 80-90% of that content creation, like the social media post creation.
Yep.
And that's going to save you, quite a few hours every single week. Like I gave a presentation on how to use these tools to the different companies back home from a marketing perspective, but also other perspectives as well. And so with ChatGPT, for example, you can say, what are 10 ways to promote a podcast about development and entrepreneurship, like coding and entrepreneurship? It'll give you some really interesting ideas that you can then go and see, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what fits the vibe that you're trying to output. But then you can actually say things like, give me captions for an Instagram post about a podcast segment where the guest is talking about productivity. And it'll then give you a caption, hashtags and all, that you can then go and throw straight into your caption. You can create, 10, 15 of these. You can then create your clips and turn that into something that you can automate on Canva as well through some of Canva's other tools. It's a little different when you've got video content instead of just images, but the idea and the concept is very similar that way. And I think when you start looking at how you can automate certain tasks, then it'll take away from some of the mundane things that we're doing that take away our time. Like I think marketing is important. It's one of the most important things anyone can do for their business. But it can be such a time-consuming thing, especially if you and or me are the only people on the team working on it. And so I'm totally fine with automating parts of this for now. And eventually in the future, I can hire someone to come and make it more customized. But at least for today, automate it. And by automating it, you don't have to spend that creative time thinking about it. Instead, you can focus on strategizing and coming up with other ideas instead.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I love that point. Especially the final point as well. That works really well into it, because it's funny. I'd been wanting to make a LinkedIn for the podcast as well as a Twitter for quite a little while, but um, being an engineer at heart, I'm not quite the wordsmith that I would like to be, and so writing anything is a nightmare. And I think last week, a week or two ago, I actually had thought to myself, I was like, right, how can I utilize like ChatGPT or something for this? And that's now what I do, is for like the posts on LinkedIn or Twitter or things like that, trying to automate those with ChatGPT. So yeah, really good point. And I
Well,
think it,
some additional tips for you is you can actually, like, if you've got writing style, like if you've got your writing style that you want to maintain,
mhm,
you can actually feed that into ChatGPT. So you can say, learn my writing style, paste it in. Now write a blog post or a LinkedIn post about these 5 things. And it'll do it in your voice. So that's one. And then the second one is, if you have a certain vibe or energy you're trying to go for example, if you want it to be humorous, or you want it to be serious, or you want it to be, I can't think of other words right now. My brain is still sleeping. But you can actually use those in your ChatGPT prompt and say, make this LinkedIn post funny, or make
mhm.
this LinkedIn post target Gen Z audience, and it'll go and give you like very different captions to use. But that's ways to keep that professional aspect, but be able to keep it in your own voice as well, because that's always hard to do with the robotic chat GPT.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely a good point as well. I'll add that on board, because it's something that I'd noticed is I'd get it to write something. I'd maybe end up getting it to write it, say, 3 or 4 times, and then I'll just proof it and change it a little bit. Because as you say, it does come through this robotic, like advert type voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But definitely, and I think automating mundane tasks is a really big thing as well. Being engineers at heart,
Yeah.
we
Yeah. I
should
mean,
maybe utilize that in our own lives as well.
it's in our blood. If we're coders, we know
Exactly.
how to automate stuff.
Exactly. But yeah, and the last point you had made for that was regarding like strategize, time to strategize. I think a point that I had noticed was when I was then automating some things, I would then look for other things to do. And that's why I thought busy for the sake of it was kind of a relevant term, is that instead of like automating something and think, right, let me sit back and look at the big picture and then how can I change things? I'm like, right, that's me. That's not busy anymore. How else can I keep busy? Um,
Mhm.
but I think it's something that people don't often realize, is that the kind of higher up you are in your career, or if you're trying to think as a higher up in your own company, so like you are everything from CEO to engineer, you have to take these kind of strategic mindset and decision making, um, and it's more about the making those good decisions than making lots of decisions.
Yeah. And just going back to something I said earlier, if you have those lists of things that you need to get done, like you've actually written it down, then you're not filling that empty time or that empty space with just a random thing to work on. Instead, you're picking things on that list that you want to get done. So it stops feeling like being busy for the sake of being busy and not actually being productive. And you start becoming productive, and you can cross off those things on your list as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's funny that you mentioned that, as can't see it here, but I don't have a whiteboard, but instead I have like these you can't really see it, but
Yeah.
basically like pull out whiteboards. They're kind of like
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Like a
yeah,
scroll kind of thing with a,
exa-
yeah.
yeah. And I have one on this wall, one on that wall, and I always like put them up when I have ideas or I feel as if I'm getting overwhelmed with work, and it's just a way to visualize it all written down, and then I can look at it and see, right, how much of this is just fluff that doesn't really matter, or something that maybe like you've been thinking of starting something for a couple of weeks, a month, 2 months, whatever it is. You then write it down, you look at it, you can analyze it a little bit. It's now out of your mind, you can let it process in the back. And then like a week later, you look at the list and you're like, is it really worth the effort to do that idea? Probably not. Meanwhile, you
Yeah.
just spent like 6 weeks before it. being like, this is the best idea ever, and it takes up so much of your mental bandwidth. So I definitely agree that your listing is a good way to visualize and then also prioritize as well. But yeah. A question when you were talking about hype docs in regards to B2B, how practically did you make or are you making the decision? So like if I'm someone who does have like a little startup and I have you know, a few customers, but I'm looking at actually I want to approach the B2B strategy, how would you go about doing that?
So definitely depends on what your product is. Is your product something that is easy to flip into a B2B product? And then is it something where you're trying to sell whatever you have, which is, let's say it's a B2C product on its own. Are you then offering multiple subscriptions, or are you creating a new product or a slightly updated product that is B2B focused? And so I'm actually doing the latter, where I've taken the core Hype Docs concept of tracking achievements and working towards goals, and we're now looking at how that looks like from a business perspective. So we have created a Slack app. That way the entire experience lives within Slack, and you don't actually have to log into our website anymore if you don't want to, because that's always a blocker. With the Slack app experience, we can actually create a lot more engagement, which lends very well to a business perspective and not necessarily an individual perspective, right? Because as an individual, I don't necessarily have my stuff on the Slack channel. Like I'll just have it on the website.
Yeah.
But if this is a product that my company is not providing me, I can use it in Slack. I can then, the engagement pieces we built out are ways to celebrate yourself, or like track the work that you've done. And as you create a new hype or as you close up a goal, you can actually share that to the Slack community in a wins channel so that other people can see what you've been doing and celebrate the work that you're doing as well. And that, one of my core goals is making sure we're supporting underrepresented folks and we're helping with diversity and inclusion. By offering this, we're able to make sure that underrepresented folks are visible at a company. Like they're able to actually track the accomplishments of the work that they're doing, which I guarantee you is significantly more than their manager generally knows. And that work gets celebrated. You're now building a system in place where it's, I'm blanking on my words right now. You're building a system in place where this is now something that can be tracked, something that is visible, something that between the manager and the employee relationship, there's a lot more trust being built out because you have that autonomy of being able to say, hey, I'm working towards this goal and I want to make sure that I'm on track to get that goal, whether it's a promotion, it's leading a project, or it's something else. And by providing that sort of space for employees and for managers, it's now become a tool that we built that specifically got a B2B focus.
Yeah.
I did, when I first launched Hype Docs, we did try to sell a B2B version, sell the existing version as a B2B product where businesses could then go and sign up their employees or community members onto the platform themselves. And it worked a little bit, but that engagement, like that community engagement piece, both for communities as well as businesses, wasn't there. And that's where we kind of lacked. And that's why the focus now is like really focusing on that community aspect, really focusing on hyping not just yourself, but everyone else at the company up. Yeah. And then again, keeping that core focus of trying to improve diversity and inclusion at companies, trying to make sure that underrepresented folks are able to get the support that they need, but also get the recognition that they need as well. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question there. But...
Yeah, no, definitely, because I think these are parts of product design that you don't really think of, or that people don't think of who aren't in the space, for that you have to modify it, and you have to modify it to the needs of the customer. And so if your customer is changing from like a person to a company, that's a huge difference. And you need to think, how most efficiently can you do that? And I think a product such as Hype Docs moving on to Slack, as a person who uses Slack like 9 to 5 all the time, I could see that in every single Slack channel or every single like company Slack all across the world. I don't see why not. And it, especially and what you're saying with the transparency thing as well, is it's like a trust, sorry, with the manager. It also does give that level of transparency, which I think not often there. I know that at like leading kind of consultancies and things like that, they have ways you can track your achievements or experiences, but the ways that you track is literally like a PowerPoint or an Excel or something. And it's you have to organize it individually, you have to deal with it individually. And if you want anyone to see it, you'd have to share the link. Whereas to have it all centralized in a single product builds that trust, but again, builds that transparency into what you actually do. Because especially remote working, which is like where Slack comes in the most, people just, they don't see you all day. They just, I don't know if they assume you're not doing much, but they don't see the work that you do.
There's no proof of the work you're doing unless you submit something. Yeah. Also, thank you. I was trying to remember the word transparency and you said it. So thank you. That's actually one of our goals, is like building that transparency into the system.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I can see that. So there you go. There's my sales pitch for Hype Docs.
After this, I should definitely send you some info and we can see if you can get at least to try it out. I'd love to get your feedback on how Hype Docs works for you.
Yeah, 100%.
But one thing you did remind me of, which is related to your last question, is when you flip from B2C to B2B, the way that you approach the customer also has to change, because more likely than not, when you're selling B2B, your customer and your user are two different people. So your customer is the person you're selling to. And for me, that's the head of HR, the head of people, sometimes the CEO if it's a smaller company. But the user is the employees at the company. And so when you're pitching the product, you have to figure out what language to use to show the head of HR, the head of people, hey, this is a really great product because it's going to save you time in these areas. It's going to automate these processes for you, and it's going to give you these ROI. And that's different to what you need to pitch to individual users when they get onto your platform to convince them to use it as well. And so I think that becomes one of the more challenging things when you're going from B2B to B2C. However, the benefit of B2B compared to B2C is you're now selling to one person and ideally getting a larger check size than trying to sell to the equivalent, 50 or 100 people as well. So there's pros and cons, and you just got to weigh them out and figure out what makes the most sense for you. And ideally, some of the best products, and what I'm trying to do with Hype Docs is have, we're fully focused on B2B at the moment, but I don't want to shut down the B2C aspect. So it will always be an option for people to sign up and create their own accounts and use the web platform themselves, and potentially even install Slack into a community that they're part of, because that now becomes a form of advertising for us, where we're not necessarily set up in that community, but if someone installs it into that community, other people can find out about it, create their own accounts and use it as well. And that's just the unique aspect of like the way that we have built and designed our platform at the moment. Ideally, we'll eventually get onto MS Teams and Discord. I'd say for a variety of reasons, MS Teams is a lot higher on my list than I would have expected it to be. But those are just like, how do you continue reaching the customers that you need, and how do you continue delivering what they need from you? And we're getting there slowly but surely. We're getting there.
Absolutely, as long as you're moving in the right direction. And from what you're saying there, one thing that is resonating back with me to what we spoke of earlier of the origin of Hype Docs, as you were saying about that community aspect of being with meeting other people, and if they don't show up, they bring baked the next time. Like to meet people in that way, to hype one another up. It seems then now obvious looking back that this product would work best in like a B2B type environment where you're essentially selling it as a community product as opposed to just an individual product.
So our like one-liner pitch is we're helping companies with engagement and retention, because ideally with engagement, you're getting everyone at the community to share the things that they're working on and to celebrate both themselves as well as other people. And then from a retention perspective, if you as an employee are happy at your company, you're less likely to leave. And I'm sure you, as well as a lot of the listeners, are very aware of what's happening in the tech industry and in the global market in general when it comes to hiring and layoffs and everything. So there's a lot of uncertainty for jobs, and on top of that, there's a monetary cost to losing an employee and having to replace them. So for businesses, it's really important for them to actually try to retain the talent that they have. And then, there's that second underlayer of, you definitely don't want to lose your underrepresented folks, because that's even more work for you to then go and figure out how to improve on. And so that's kind of what we're trying to help. That's our pitch to businesses, and then our pitch to the employees, so the people using it, is we want to help you get promoted. We want to help you get recognition, and we also want to help you beat imposter syndrome and build your confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it does work across all those. Another thing, and I know this isn't, I'm not a advisor or consultant type doc, so I was feeling that way the past 5 minutes, the way my brain's working. But
I'm always open to ideas.
Another place, honestly, that I could see it flourishing is within the LinkedIn space in some capacity. I don't know how plugins or anything like that work, but definitely within there as a way to show accomplishments.
Does LinkedIn have plugins? Like you can write your own?
I don't think so, no. That's what I'm saying. I don't know how it would go in, even if it's just like a link or something, I don't know. But I feel like that's the type of environment in which it would work well.
Yeah. Well, so some of the stuff that we are looking to build in the next few months is integrations. So inbound integrations, for example, if your company tracks your project work on Trello or Jira, anytime you close those tickets, we can automatically track that in HypeDocs as well. But then also outbound. And outbound would be going to Twitter or LinkedIn as places you want to go and share your celebration. And then that's great for us, because if you're sharing your stuff on LinkedIn, other people will find out about us too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as far as I'm aware, LinkedIn does not have an app option, but we can automate that build. One of the other things that it's on my list. I'm not actively looking at it right now because it is not high priority, but I think it'd be really cool, is with ChatGPT and with all the other AI tools that exist at the moment. There's also a company here in Canada called Cohere, and like I know the founders. I love the founders. We're actually looking at, if we give you the option to select 5 or 10 hypes that you're proud of, we can then craft a bio for you that you can then use for a speaking engagement or, for work or whatever you need it for. But similarly, and with this conversation with you, we could probably do the same idea and do this, give you content that you can then post onto LinkedIn as well. That's something I'm going to have to go figure out from a cost perspective, what that breakdown would look like. But I think that's something that could really help elevate our HypeDocs LinkedIn interaction too.
Yeah, absolutely. Try and get some interaction between ChatGPT to rate it, and maybe even some Canva integration to put it directly into like a post for. Yeah.
Oh, I don't have time.
Sorry for the extra work.
No, it's great. It's great because it like, part of the reason I love having these kinds of conversations is, if you're coming up with ideas, it's because you can see how it works. And your ideas, and this is you in general, right? Like obviously you, Luke, but then also you as in whoever else is listening. I'm always open to ideas, because you never know where the idea might start and the implementation of that looks like. But 99% of the times, if it's something we're able to build out and prioritize, it's something that could help send us over the edge, kind of thing, and like really make us accelerate our sales as well.
100%. Yeah, and it's that outside perspective, bringing in the new ideas.
Exactly.
Which, you need as well.
Especially when it's me, myself, and I at the company. It's a lot harder to do that. So always welcoming these ideas.
Absolutely. Well, thanks a lot for coming on. I really appreciate your time again. It's been brilliant speaking to you, as always.
Likewise. I feel like we need to have these chats regularly, whether or not it's on the air.
Absolutely. Talk about our business ideas.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Luke, for having me. And if you're still around as a listener, thanks for listening in.